Welcome to the Texas News Podcast, where we dive into all things Texas and the future of independence in the great state of Texas. On today's show, State Representative Andy Hopper is going to be joining us to be talking about his brand new piece of legislation that does some pretty amazing things, House Bill 4857. And we're going to be talking about some dysfunction that's going on in the Texas Legislature. We're going to get a behind-the-scenes view that most people don't get when it comes to the operations of the Texas House of Representatives. So don't go anywhere. Hey, thank you so much for joining me again for the Texas News Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist Movement. And as I stated, we've got a great one for you. State Representative Andy Hopper, one of our Texas First pledge signers, is going to be joining me today. And we're going to be talking really some inside baseball related to the Texas House of Representatives. You know, we're going to talk about a piece of legislation that he filed that I think is the crown jewel of all the legislation that he's filed. And we're going to be really peeling back the lid on some of the inner workings of what's going on in the Texas House of Representatives. I know many of you out there have expressed concern, whether it's in comments or emails to this particular podcast or on my weekly live stream, Late Night Coffee Talk, or just sending emails in. You've expressed a lot of concern, a lot of confusion about what's going on with the Texas Legislature. And so we're going to lay it all out. When Andy comes on, we're going to just absolutely take it wherever it goes. And of course, beyond that, we're going to be talking about this piece of legislation, House Bill 4857. It establishes what's called a Financial Risk Management Commission. And if it sounds a bit complex, I assure you it's not. It's something that Texas should have done a very long time ago, and it definitely fits into the entire Texit process. And that's something I'll explain after I bring Andy on and talk about all this other stuff. So without further ado, let me bring on my good friend. Now I have to call him something other than just Andy. It's Representative Andy Hopper, who is an HD 64 up there in Wise County. He'll talk about all that. Just a phenomenal guy. Absolutely love him and his family, and just so glad that he could be on today. Andy, thank you so much for joining me today. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know. Am I still allowed to call you Andy, or do I have to refer to you as Representative Hopper?
Andy is 100%. Like,
okay.
This whole situation of titles and all that stuff is ridiculous. I get really tired of it. I think I spent the first week in the Capitol just saying, no, name's Andy, just telling people that. And after a while, you kind of give up because people don't listen to you. But anyways, no, Andy forever. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no worries, man. I got to tell you, I'm very excited because as we're recording this, the day before the filing deadline, you filed a piece of legislation, got everyone really excited. But before we tear into that, what I'd like to do is, for those who don't know, from my pitiful little intro that I did that apparently doesn't do justice to Your Holiness, Representative Hopper, the fact of the matter is, a lot of people that listen to this are going to know you as Andy Hopper, Wise County Conservatives, Texas First pledge signer. You've done live stream before, but there's going to be a lot of new folks. So why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm Andy Hopper, represent House District 64, which is all of Wise and northwest part of Denton County, including the city of Denton. So, I ran for the seat a couple times. In 2022, I think we were the closest Republican race in the state. It was about 80 votes. And so we had to take a deep breath and decide to do it one more time in 2024, which was fun because there were so many of our friends who we come to know over the many last years that had also run in 2022, like Shelley Luther and Mike Olcott and many others. So it was kind of fun doing it one more time with all these folks that were persistent, and I think it's kind of cool. It actually makes it much better being down in the legislature with people that you trust and you've known for years. So it would be conversely a very unfortunate situation if you were the only person down there that was, fighting for small government and fighting for fiscal responsibility. But that's just not the case. We have so many good fighters down there with us. So, married 27 years. Amanda is my just right hand. She is my MVP. She goes everywhere with me. And as you know, 3 boys, live on a small farm, and wish we had more time to do all of the things here on the farm. But it's been, really interesting because I got placed on the ag committee, which, is like one of those things where I think a lot of freshmen maybe don't want to be on committees like that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Love that topic, and also on insurance. So we're about halfway through the session, which is kind of shocking, Daniel. You know how many votes we've taken on legislation, either a committee or on the floor?
Oh, I know. That's a goose egg.
Yeah.
Well, no, wait a minute. Now, hang on. You did congratulate Beyonce.
Well, I didn't, but yeah, that the body did, right?
The body did. I mean, I wasn't saying you specifically, Andy. I mean, it's part of the body. And okay, so let me ask you this, because we've got some legislation that I want to get into. Question not on my list. Do you think the Beyonce resolution is going to be this session's equivalent to the Andy Murr's mustache commemoration from 2 sessions back?
Yeah, I don't know if we've topped out on weird resolutions yet. It was definitely peaking there a couple weeks ago, and I think that when they only had a couple people go up and register vote changes, or mark voting no, or whatever notes that they decided to put in the journal, when they only had a couple people doing that, I think that they were much more inclined to just plow through all that. But I mean, they're getting 20 to 30 people that are consistently voting against the 5-day weekends, voting against these silly resolutions.
Right.
And they're all getting out on social media. And, here's the thing, when you have people that have social media presences like Shelley Luther that, challenge that of the Speaker of the House, you've just got to really watch your P's and Q's a little bit better than they have in previous sessions, because the word gets out fast. Right. So, anyway, so yeah, that was a weird one. There's been quite a few weird ones though, Daniel. I mean, when you actually follow some of the things that go on day by day, I think there were 5 or 6 that I put my name on, was voting no, on Thursday. And so they continue to just do silly things. And honestly, I think everybody that was down, went down this session to fight for, the people of Texas are sick and tired of just day in and day out on resolutions. Like, we should be doing a lot more with our time.
Right. Well, and that has been one of the chief criticisms, but I will tell you, you and I had some chance to talk before the session started, but I'll tell you the conversations that we had over here as we saw during pre-filing, just the sheer number of bills and resolutions that were being filed. My take on it was that, particularly when you saw so many bills being filed that had effectively the same subject matter, right? They covered the same things. They did it almost in exactly the same way. And to me, it smacked of a tactic to try to push as much through, or push as much into the system as possible, so that they would have, be able to much easier use the excuse that they use every session, which is, hey, we would have loved to have done something substantive and real to protect your liberty, to reduce your taxes or eliminate your taxes, but we simply ran out of time. And, I think I can't remember what the total was I saw, but between the House and the Senate, we're over 7,000 pieces of legislation filed. I can't help but think, Andy, that that's really what the ultimate tactic is here, is just to cram the pipeline full, have a bunch of 5-day weekends, and say, well, we ran out of time, to basically knock out anything else.
Yeah, there's so much legislation that's been filed that addresses, in one fashion or form, Governor Abbott's emergency items. That could have been considered, for a long time now, right? We're way past the point where, we should have considered all of that emergency legislation, yet none of it has been. You know, even in my committees, I mean, I've had 2 ag committee hearings and one insurance committee hearing, and that's it. Grand total. We've taken no votes in either committee, and that's pretty typical, right? Some committees are doing some things like recreations and stuff, but generally speaking, that's the story you see, and it's not an accident. Like when you talk to a lot of the gray beards, that have been there a long time, and you just say, I think this is on purpose. I think that we're slow rolling the clock, slow rolling the assignments of committees on purpose to cram as much work into as small a time as possible so that leadership can pick and choose exactly what comes off that calendar. When you tell those folks, I think this is the plan, I mean, you can see the recognition in their eyes. They know that's the plan. Like that,
Yeah.
It's not even a joke. Like it's almost just admitted that this is how it works in the legislature. And it's just hilarious to see some of these people go back to their districts and say, you know what? Constitution doesn't let me do anything. I'm just so, we're stuck. We can't do it. I mean, that narrative is so universal and so consistent among all of these recs that go back home. And the level of irritation that they get with all of us saying, hey, I voted against the 5-day weekend. I think we should get to work. And I'd say, it's tangential, the budget fight. I mean, the budget is a baked cake. When you come into session, they've got it all figured out. They're not really willing to make any changes. And they figure out exactly how much of this massive surplus should go back on property tax relief, which, newsflash, is not much. And, they have all the talking points figured out for the whole thing. To me, I've heard a story from, another rep that was in an appropriations meeting, and it was hilarious to hear him relate how a $900 million rider was adjudicated by this committee.
Oh yeah.
It's shocking. And I think people should be shocked. And if we accomplish nothing else this session of just educating our voters of the misfunction of this body, because they need to know, like, this isn't what any of our ancestors voted to establish.
It's
theater.
Well, it is. There's a lot of theater to it, and I would say this, and I've been hypercritical of the legislature. I mean, let's be honest. I have for many years alternated between harsh criticism of the legislature and harsh criticism of the governor, and often those two overlap because I have learned that I can walk and chew gum at the same time, aka criticize the functions of the Texas government. But Andy, I want to bring this back around to you're in your freshman year, and I know you and I knew each other before you got in the ledge. Is this what you expected?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not shocked by it. We studied it from the outside for years. You can't run, 2 house races and not by the end of it fully understand what the behavior pattern is, the talking points, the $18 billion, the largest property tax cut in human history, and it's only 12.7, that kind of thing. Like you have to understand the details and the nitty-gritty and some of the inside baseball. So I'm not shocked. I think the only thing to me that really has raised my eyebrows is the level of influence of the lobby in Austin. Yeah. That's the part that I was talking to a person who recently won a U.S. congressional seat, and they pointed out to me, they said, in Washington, we talk about it like the worst legislative body in the whole country in terms of the involvement of the lobby is the Texas Legislature. And now there, I totally understand that it's crazy. And so anyway, I asked some of these reps, that don't like the counter narrative of, hey, we're not getting stuff done. We're voting for 5-day weekends and that needs to stop. And, they'll get their hackles up and they'll say, we're so busy. I mean, your day isn't busy. My day is totally busy is what they'll say. And I'll ask them, I said, if you were to mentally subtract the lobby from your day, all of those interactions, all of those door knocks, all of those meetings in your office with the lobby, would your day be busy? And you could see it in their eyes. They're like, yeah, that was probably 70% of my day. And that part, I think, is the one thing I wasn't really prepared for. And so you have to manage that, right?
Well, I mean, look, if all they're looking for is to be busy, they can just go in their backyard and dig a hole. I mean, that's not the job that they were sent there to do. But look, I would posit to you that really and truly, you guys, you and Shelley and Mike Olcott, a lot of our Texas First pledge signers, I would posit that you guys are in a very interesting position that really the legislature's never seen. And it goes back to what you mentioned about Shelley having, more followers on social media than the Speaker of the House. You guys have come in with a platform. I say a platform, a reach that is far greater than your district and far larger than what you would see the political establishment have. How do you think, and I know you talked about this before, but I really want to get it. How do you think that's been able to affect some of the behavior that we're seeing? Is the establishment running scared? Are they nervous about it? Or are they just kind of doing their normal, hey guys, grassroots, here's my middle finger. Can you check my fingernail for me?
Well, I think that's their inclination, to be quite honest. I think that their political outlook is to despise the RPT, the Republican Party of Texas, and their perception of the grassroots, while at the same time trying to gaslight all of their all of their peers and even their constituents that they are the grassroots candidate, which is interesting, and I have specific examples of that, but But like I say, they actually really do despise the grassroots. They despise, the legislative priorities put forth by the party. They despise Abraham George. They despise, I think the entire America First, Texas First movement that President Trump is, pioneering in Washington of dismantling government. I think that if they were honest, like that actually really assaults their sensibilities. These are people who thrive on big government. These are people whose number one priority last session, if you're honest, was HB 5, I think, which was basically awarding $18 billion in tax abatements to corporations, which violates the Republican Party platform and the Democrat Party platform. I mean, it's actually staggering to me that it's pretty capitalism. And so, I think that they are running scared now because I think that they used to command the narrative. They're so used to commanding the narrative. And there's just too many of us. And so like a great example is what they tried to do to Brian Harrison a couple weeks ago. They thought they had that locked up. They figured a couple tweets from this statewide elected and this statewide elected. And, we would have, Brian Harrison on a rope. And that's not what happened at all. I think that what you actually saw was people were willing to watch the video. And they were willing to see, I think this was an engineered effort to take down a very outspoken political conservative. It didn't work at all. And it didn't even work in the short term. Like there was such a grassroots outcry that it just dwarfed the narrative that was being pushed by many in Austin. So to me, it's very interesting that, I do think that the collective voice of all of the freshmen and even some of the incumbents that are fighting against the uniparty, I think that we do have a bigger voice. And I think that is the game changer and obviously we all thank Elon Musk for fixing X because that's a huge part of everything, right? I mean, before he came along, we didn't have any social media platforms that, really advanced or allowed us to advance our narrative at all. And now we do. So anyway, I think it's a good thing. I think we're in a really good spot. And I think that if they were honest, they have no idea how they're going to win in the long term. Speaker Burrows has one option, which I think that he's not even serious about now. But I think that, maybe even a few weeks ago, I think that their thought was, well, if we can get 76 Republicans to get behind us by the end of session, we'll be able to just sail into the 90th legislature and tell everybody, hey, we don't even need Democrats. And he'll be able to re-engineer his entire origin story of why he is the selected speaker, instead of the truth that he was the Democrats' pick. And I think that there's already been enough hostility, and there's already been enough behavior of some of these lieutenants that he's put in place that I think that, these freshmen have had their eyes open. I think they were already astute what was going on. But I think now that they're in and they see how Austin operates, how they see how the unit party basically advances the Democrat agenda over the true conservative legislation that people expect and deserve, and basically give people breadcrumbs, session after session, when they should control the legislature. Republicans are in firm control of the legislature, should be. They weren't ceding power to Democrats. They'll allow a moderate to become speaker. So.
Yeah, it's Andy, I'll tell you, and I know, and you can pass this along to your colleagues. I would just say this. I know that it's probably pretty easy to get discouraged, just frustrated, discouraged with the things that are going on. But understand, I think this session, and you guys and your gang of 20 are probably represent more of a game changing session, group, whatever you want to call it, caucus, than what we saw in the Tea Party suite back in 2010. It just, you guys are going about this a different way, and I think you guys are the first of many new state reps that are going to come online in 2 years. You're still out there championing legislation that is really applauded and wanted by most Texans. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You guys are out there and you're fighting extra hard to give a seat at the table to people who may be represented by some of these knotheads. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, man, this is my state rep, or this is my state senator. They don't listen to us. They don't vote like we want them to. They're just up there and they're stuck. And so they put their hopes in guys like y'all. I think you're championing transparency by giving a connection between the voters and the legislature like they've never seen. I mean, think about it. One of the things that we've talked about often is the fact that how could we, say, post-independence guarantee that a Texas government would be any better than Washington, D.C.? And we say the only reason these guys in Austin are allowed to get away with so much is because D.C. sucks all the oxygen out of the room, all the federal things. But you guys are bringing a new transparency, a new communications paradigm. You don't have to, used to, like you said, the establishment, they could run that gaslight on Brian Harrison with no problem at all. But we're operating in a new environment where their usual outlets, the Scott Braddocks of the world, the Texas Tribunes of the world, the Houston Chronicle, the Dallas Morning News, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, trust in those normal outlets. I mean, the only thing that has a lower approval and trust rating is the United States Congress. Right. So, I mean, the media is scraping the bottom of the barrel, like to the point that in speeches now, I have to talk about, that the federal government approval polls somewhere right above or below leprosy, but sometimes typically below the media, So this is the situation that we're in. And Andy, I'm going to tell you, you guys just keep the faith, man. I mean, y'all are doing something that I think is going to be in the long term and maybe in the short term, history making. It's going to change the entire face of Texas politics. That's my prediction.
Well, I appreciate that perspective. And I'll tell you, like, I always try to, whenever I speak publicly about it, try to be as optimistic as possible, because I think there's a lot of room for optimism. I think that to the very few that have been following this entire saga of, the uniparty and the collusion with Democrats to select the Speaker of a Republican House. And like so many people know that story now, and they know where we are in that tale, basically unwinding that method of a speaker selection. But I think that what's encouraging to me is the fact that there's so many of us that understand, that have run multiple times. That really is key. I really am thankful for all of the work and all of the doors and everything that had to be done to basically meet all the voters in my district, at their doorstep, and understand what their concerns were, and to know that that we're there to represent people outside the building. We're not there to represent people inside the building, right? I think that it's that understanding and that like heartfelt belief that the people inside the building are the irrelevant ones, and the people outside the building are the people that are actually going to transform this chamber. And I think that is exactly what you're talking about. I think that going back to the grassroots and telling them, hey, this is what's going on, and having them help you educate Texas about this problem, and it's working. I'm telling you, I think I may have mentioned to you before, my wife has always cut my hair. So because we're cheap. And
hey man, don't be bragging about hair.
I know. So we got in there, and it just doesn't work out that way. And so she says, you need a professional now. So anyways, I've been going to a barber. So anyways, went out to Bridgeport a few weeks ago. And so, I mean, just give you that backdrop. I don't know the barber well. You know what I mean? I've only seen him a couple times. And so, to my knowledge, he's not, come to the conservative meetings or any, political groups. And so I'm saying, it's like, I wouldn't think just person like this is plugged in to the same, social circles that I am. And yet I sit down, and immediately he's like, man, can you believe what that Dustin Burrows did? And he knew all about it. And this isn't an isolated story. I mean,
Andy, not to interrupt, but just so folks understand that are watching or listening, that is a new development. I mean, most people couldn't pick the Speaker of the Texas House out of a lineup. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So that's huge.
It's huge. And all of the other reps are saying the same thing when they go back to district. Like, the political awareness of the dysfunction of the Texas House is not outside the realm of like the, collective understanding. It used to be that everybody, I mean, I can even tell you, like, when we were knocking in 2021 and 2022, and meet people at their door, these were political conservatives that were very focused on Washington, D.C. as being the solution to all of our problems. And now I think that the understanding that like local government and state government has much more impact on your life. And if we're going to ever establish, either a union or sovereignty in the context of what our founding fathers understood, that, our state constitution espouses, that the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution espouses, if that's what we're fighting for, it's not going to be found by, a dispensation of federal courts, that it's going to be people in their state legislature standing up. And I always talk about, it's my favorite Federalist paper is Federalist 26. And it talks about how, that the state legislatures are really the most powerful branch of government. They created the U.S. Constitution, that ratified the U.S. Constitution, that created the federal government. And, they should always be suspicious and jealous guardians of the rights of citizens against federal tyranny. And they should be the voice, and if necessary, the arm of the discontent of the people. And, when you tell people that, I did like thousands of times, and you give them that story is, hey, this is what our state legislature could be again, if only we allow it to be the kind of, body that represents the ideals of our founding fathers of Texas. And, we can tell the feds no. And, it's kind of hard now. Like, it's, March of 2025, and President Trump has been like thinking about taking names for 2 months. But if you mentally transport yourself 3 or 4 months ago, like, people did not know where we were going. It was a terrifying dystopian reality that we were faced with, where the president of the United States stands, shrouded with stormtroopers in front of Independence Hall with that red light. Like, when people in that environment, the only last resort of the people is the state legislatures, who, and their ability to tell the feds no is that last line of defense. And when you explain that to people, they get really excited. And I think that there's something there that's really profound and important. Is just to understand that, like, we are really off the rails in the way that our government should operate. You know, federal courts have basically, in their own minds, over 100 years, basically eradicated at least 2 amendments of the U.S. Constitution, the 9th and 10th. And they've done it, without the consent of any of the government. And we have to reestablish that, because nobody ever signed up for the constitutional interpretation that we are getting and have gotten from federal courts. It's obviously been a little bit better lately, but, we had decades and decades of the expansion of commerce clause and this worked understanding the supremacy clause and the corporation doctrine and all this stuff that has turned the entire system of government we have on its head. And it left us.
Yeah. I mean, look, as we're seeing now, I think the last count that I had on my spreadsheet was that I think it was 18 of Trump's actions have been halted, blocked, or hit by the federal courts. I think there's been 2 or 3 instances where it's been overruled on appeal, whatever. But the general gist of this is the federal judiciary has typically been part and parcel of the problem. I mean, we deal with it all the time here. So whether you agree with Trump's policies or not, even if you think what's happening, what he's doing is beneficial for Texas, understand that there is some unelected, unaccountable federal judge standing between us and our ability to govern ourselves. And Andy, let me just do this, because I want to get to some specific legislation. You filed some phenomenal bills. Man, I'm going to let you, we'll talk about what I consider the crown jewel, but we'll talk about some of those others. But before we do that, I want you to help me out with something, if you don't mind. There are, and I've heard it all too often, there are, I think, what I would call people that are short-term thinkers, right? They're not looking at the long term. And they keep referring to this as a wasted session. How do you respond? What is your message to those people that are looking at this as a quote unquote wasted session?
Well, okay. So my initial reaction is who's wasting it actually? Mm-hmm. And I would say it's House leadership. And I don't think it's an exaggeration at all to just say the truth, which I've been saying openly to, in the Capitol, that, this place is run by 5 guys. And it really is.
Oh, like the same ones that make the hamburgers?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's they've consolidated power to the point that it's not an exaggeration to say that, Dustin and a few of his lieutenants pretty much run the whole House. And it's not like 150 representatives coming together and, adjudicating, these things openly. And, it's just even the selection of, like you mentioned before, what actually comes before a committee. It's diabolical. And I'll get back to your question in that. But to me, it's the most diabolical thing when you educate folks about the fact that it's now basically part of state law in the House rules, essentially, that every single committee must have a Democrat vice chair. And that vice chair is no longer ceremonial. That vice chair can do the very, very important and profoundly powerful thing of just saying that he wants to bring something to the committee to be heard, and it must be heard. That is shocking, because we have freshman Democrats that are vice chairs of committees. Freshman Democrats. We don't have any conservatives that are running committees in the Texas House. Let me put it another way. Not a single person that supported David Cook is a committee chair in the Texas House. The majority of the Republican caucus opposed Dustin Burrows.
Yeah.
And those individuals cannot bring anything before a committee or ask anything to be heard. But we give freshman Democrats the ability to have that power. And that's the kind of sinister trade. So whose fault is it? Obviously, it's leadership's fault. But is it a wasted session? I think for the reasons you said a minute ago, it's absolutely not wasted, because this is the difficult road we have to travel to restore the Texas House and to reform it. For most of Texas history, and it's kind of shock when people don't know this, but it's like for most of Texas history, even the assignment of committees was an amendable resolution. And, we could debate that on the floor. If we didn't like the selections that the speaker had made, we could basically amend it on the floor. That seems totally responsible to me. But we centralized power to the point that in many ways, all of these representatives that are outside that circle are totally irrelevant to the system. And even when they're the majority of the Republican Party that runs the House theory. And so our hope was that we were going to be able to turn over that apple cart in one session by electing a person that had promised reforms, David Koch, and that we would be in a totally different position in terms of who the leadership would be and how the House was run. And that we would be able to pull that off in one session. I think people would be shocked at how close we were. And it was really just basically a handful of arbitrators that in the final hours of that speaker vote that basically changed the game towards in the benefit of the speaker. And but we were very, very close. And I think that it's just going to take 2 sessions to do it. So what do we do this session? Is it wasted? No, absolutely. It's not wasted. I think there's going to be some legislation passed this session that, people are happy with. Will it be as much as we want? I suspect not. Yeah. It gets the same modus operandi that we get every session, where it's basically, well, we're going to give you a few of the legislative priorities. We'll give you a few bills. Maybe the bills are watered down, not as good, but people will feel like that there is some advancement of the conservative cause. And as long as that narrative is able to be explained, that leadership feels like that they've succeeded by doling out these pittance bills that conservatives care about. I mean, it's like banning Chinese land sales is a great example. Like, that's not a new idea. Like, this is an idea that's been put forward to the legislature for multiple sessions. And the time for that bill had really come 2 years ago.
Right.
And it was it was completely off the table. Like, there was no way leadership was going to allow that to pass. And now they're going to give it to us probably in the 89th legislature. That seems to be like, we're always behind the curve, right? We're never actually solving the problems we need to solve when we need to solve. And so that's what we need to change. So I don't think it's a lost session. I think that the way we win is to push as hard as we can to get as much conservative stuff this session, because let's face it, the speaker owes the Democrats. And so, there's going to be this inertia to basically pull the reins back to oppose some, windfall of conservative legislation, because the Democrats won't want that. So the way that we fight is we try to push every single bit of conservative legislation as far as we can and get the most that we can out of this session. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, let's, I think that's a good segue. So let's talk about some of your priorities, some of the bills you filed. Obviously for us, we're always interested in anything that's advancing the political, cultural, or economic independence of Texas. Why don't you talk about some of the legislation that you filed that might fit the bill that our people will be extremely excited to hear about?
Yeah, well, so late last week, Ledge Council was fairly slow, and partly because you mentioned there's so many bills. I mean, it's historic. It's always historic, but over 5,000 bills in the House. And so we were waiting on some of the legislation we cared about the most. We were waiting to just file that based on coming back from Legislative Council, which is basically an army of lawyers that work for the legislature. But this bill is HB 4857, and it actually it's basically the same bill with one change that Matt Krause filed multiple times when he was in the legislature. And it's a profound idea, and I think that the time for this is another example of a bill whose time really should have been passed years ago. Because if we'd had it, it would have been so instructive, especially during the Biden years, that you have a federal government is oppressive, they're swindling you, that the cost benefit of the union is not paying off for Texas, and all this bill says is, just tell us what that amount is. Let's tell us how the federal government is or is not funding the agencies that they're supposed to fund. Tell us what that cost benefit ratio is. Tell us, what effect the U.S. devalued currency is having on the Texas economy. Tell us, what impacts the federal government is holistically having on Texas and vice versa. And let Texans see that balance sheet and let them see it every 2 years. So that's what the bill advocates. We added one section that basically says that if we find ourselves in the situation we found ourselves in for the last 4 years, where we know that our local right of local self-government, which is defined in Texas Constitution, and that we have a right to a local self-government unimpaired to all the states, and this bill basically recognizes that if either chamber of the legislature issues a resolution declaring that their rights are impaired, that this report shall further include a complete laundry list of all of the costs that are associated with all of the federal functions that Texas currently is delegated to the federal government. So let's figure out exactly what it would take for Texas to assume those functions and those roles. So that's basically the only section we added, is just to add that additional detail if the legislature ever again determines that we're in a tight spot with the feds. Well, I think that I think it's just something every state should do. I mean, every state should be measuring the costs associated with a government that takes a third of your average. I mean, when you look at the founding fathers, they literally fought a war over a few pennies in taxation. It's shocking to me. But I was reading a book, trying to remember which book it was, but it was I think it was actually Thomas Jefferson's biography. It was Art of Power by Meacham. But I'm pretty sure it's that book that actually kind of went into detail about how much Americans profoundly despise taxation. It goes back to our very roots. We have a relationship now where, I think people would be shocked how much money we actually give to every level of government. I mean, it's probably well over 50% when you calculate everything. Right. And the federal government is basically, we're finding out now with Elon Musk's, incredible work, trying to figure out where all this waste, fraud, and abuse is. What we're finding is that it was literally basically a dumpster fire of money just being burnt. And so every state needs to be, doing as much as they possibly can to educate, their electorate of what that relationship is and what the federal government's doing for us or with us, or not doing.
Or to us.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is more often than not the case. Well, I mean, look, 4857 to me, I mean, I consider that sort of the crown. I mean, you've got a lot of great bills and a lot of your colleagues, there's some great legislation out there, but for me, it ticks a major box, and that major box is knowing, it's having the knowledge. I mean, look, let's be honest. When we talk about calculating how upside down Texas is in relation to the federal government, it's a purely academic exercise, because when we first endeavored to do this for real, in-house and run the report, which was, I think, back in 2014 or 2015, we found numbers from the federal side that didn't agree with each other. Basically, federal agencies that would report the same thing, which was I always thought was interesting, but those numbers they would overlap, but they wouldn't match. So you would think if they were reporting on these things and they were supposed to be reporting on the same thing, the numbers would be exactly the same, and they wouldn't. And so getting legitimate, credible data from all sources was extremely difficult. And that's why we talk about, how much, when we talk about the overpayment, how much we overpay into the federal system, that's why we have to give the range of $103 to $160 billion average annual overpayment, because the federal government can't balance its books. I mean, somebody go get these people a license to QuickBooks or something, I mean, anything, right? But it's a good thing that's, I think we're in a good spot politically speaking, with this piece of legislation, because everybody's doging out right now. They're cheering on Elon Musk. Let's find it. Let's cut it. Let's do whatever. This bill essentially does what you're talking about. I mean, it makes sense across so many areas. Find out exactly what that relationship is. But I think the other part about this that people will be excited about is it's really about risk mitigation, figuring out what we can do to mitigate any of these potential catastrophes that, let's be honest, have been on the minds of most Texans for the last 4 to 8 years, with how crazy things have been on the federal side, whether it's, the economy, the monetary policy, trade wars, defense issues, whatever those things are. Catastrophe has never been far from the mind of many Texans. And that's one of the things this bill does, creating the Fiscal Risk Management Commission. That is part of what they're tasked with in this bill, right? Is mitigating risk and mitigation strategies.
That's right. And it's funny. There was an article last week that Newsweek put together, and it was, it was a fairly well done article. The title was a little bit clickbait. It says, Texas could have its new currency, which is a part of the bills. There are bills before the legislature that kind of address that. The work.
It's not this one.
You're right.
Yeah, I was a little taken aback by that headline as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that maybe they read part of the bill and just said, hey, part of the report that needs to be given to the legislature should include, the effect on, U.S. monetary policy, devaluation of the U.S. currency, if the U.S. dollar ever lost reserve status, which honestly we were totally on track, maybe we still are, but definitely over the last few years, I mean, I think that everyone was just seeing that train wreck going to happen in our future, where eventually the dollar would cease to be the world reserve currency. And honestly, all those debts that we've accrued are going to be much, much harder to continue to accrue, right? I mean, we're not going to be able to run up the debt like they've been doing for years if that ever happened. And the effect on Texas would be tragic. And that's why, Mark DeRazio's bill to create a gold-backed currency is so important. That's why, Kevin Freeman's been signing an alarm bell on this for years. So, I mean, so this just basically studies it, but nevertheless, I think that analysis of, the risk that Texas, is facing down with a federal government that's impossibly large, impossibly complex, and honestly malicious. I mean, just not part of this bill, but just as a general note, this is a government body that in Washington D.C., the bureaucratic state, I should say, that basically perpetrated an invasion against us for years. I mean, they were literally working hand in hand with the cartels to maximize the impact of that invasion on the state of Texas. That's just one way that we were being harmed by a government that not only was just incompetent, but actually malicious. So that's what we're finding out now. And I think the more information that, citizens can have about every level of government, the cost and the impact is exactly what they need to know. And this is what that bill requires.
So, I mean, just, I'm asking for a friend here. Would it be possible to just refer to this in the future as the State of Texas Financial Complementary Colonoscopy Bill?
Right. Yeah, I think that, what, you should have given me that insight. We could have gotten it named like that. Actually, I don't think I've named any of my bills, and apparently maybe that was a fail. A lot of the bills deserve a catchy name, and we didn't give any bill a catchy name, so you just end up with this very esoteric caption.
Yeah.
And, so, anyways.
Okay. Well, perfect. Well, so let's do this because I know we're almost out of time here. A couple of questions as we wrap up. Are you anticipating any challenges or oppositions to this particular bill?
I don't know. I think that generally speaking, the Overton window should be naturally far to the right of what it is in the Texas legislature right now. And so this bill is totally within the type of legislation that normal everyday Texans would support. And nothing shocking. You're basically just saying, do more accounting. Tell us what the numbers are. That's really all the bill says. This is also a legislature that dragged its feet for years to just not give a number to how much the impeachment of Ken Paxton cost. Transparency isn't really its thing right now. And so we need to change that. So I don't know, like general opposition might just be that, not invented here. I think that you're seeing, I think it's very interesting. Like I just encourage you, go look at, all of the bills that have been referred to committee, and of those sets of bills that haven't been referred, look at, who authored the bills that are actually being scheduled for hearings in committees. I think that you'll find an interesting pattern emerging there. So, I think that it'll be interesting to see whether this bill gets heard. I'm going to fight for it. I have about, 52 bills, and that's a lot, I think, especially for a freshman. So I'm going to try to fight for all of them. But anyways, it's would have liked to have gotten this filed earlier so that, we could have worked it the last month. But, we said we have some time here. I'm going to try to get as many co-authors as we can. I think that we have plenty of conservatives that have reached out and said they love this idea. And like I say, it was a great idea when Matt Krause proposed it, and it should have been passed then. So it's high time. Let's get it done. So looking forward to working with you to try to get this through.
Well, fantastic. All right. Well, any other final words you want to give? Any advice? What are your instructions for those that are out there listening right now or watching, and want to see if they can make a difference in any of this? What would you say to them?
Well, I'll tell you this much. Especially now that we're in there, like I was a huge advocate for, trying to get local folks involved at state level, calling their representatives, calling other people's representatives to try to get bills through, try to encourage them to kind of sign on a co-author, or if they're on a committee, to support the bill when it comes before the committee, or try to get hearing for it. And I will tell you, like, once you're in that building, like the constant phone calls actually do matter, right? Because you hear that phone ring and you're sitting there thinking, I wonder what's going on. I wonder what people are, there's a pulse there, right? And so it does make a difference. I mean, contact with constituents makes a difference. It's, to me, so much more impactful than contact with the lobby. And so I think that, definitely call your state rep. Try to figure out what, this, I don't know what committee this will go to. I suspect state affairs, but it's hard set. And, but whenever this gets referred to committee, we'll put it out there, and we'll just have everybody call the members of that committee and have those members, demand a hearing for it. When it comes before the committee and it gets heard, you need to call those committee members and educate them how important this is. Tell them how important it is to the state of Texas, especially in coming years. Like, we're going to be in this predicament again. We've been in this union, 189 years now. And over that time, we've been dealing with some level of federal tyranny, ebbs and flows. We need to track it. Like, we need to make sure that we, for, the rest of Texas history, know what that relationship looks like and know whether we're getting our money's worth. So anyways, I think it's an important idea. And I think that just contacting, the folks in Austin to try to make sure that they do their job and get this bill through. There's so many good ideas before the legislature right now. I just really, really hope that our leadership understands that, like, this is an opportunity to try to really move the needle. The next 3 or 4 years, I think that the mission of every conservative, everyone who believes they're a conservative, should be resting and pulling as much control back to Texas as we can pop. And I think that's totally in line with what President Trump is trying to do in Washington, D.C. I think that we need to get our government back on the track that our founding fathers envisioned it should be on, which is most of that control, most of the things that happen that affect you should be driven from Austin and not from far off Washington, D.C. And everything's been turned on its head. Let's get it turned back on the right track. And that's what this bill and so many other bills that I filed are trying to do. So, like, this is the moment. So I just hope that leadership does not squander this moment, because this is just a golden opportunity to move the needle here in Texas.
Well, fantastic. Well, Andy, thank you so very much, and good luck to you. And keep us in the loop. Let us know what we need to do. Thank you to State Representative Andy Hopper for joining us today. Andy, I really, really do appreciate it. And look, for all of you out there listening or watching, I hope you got a lot out of this. There is so much more to be told in relation to this story, uh, particularly dealing with the dysfunction that's going on in the Texas House. And that's something that we're going to be talking about coming up. I have got a two-part series. I mean, can you call it a series if it's only two parts? I got a two-parter that's in production right now that's going to be dealing with this. We're going to go all the way back to the election of Joe Strauss as Speaker of the House, and we're going to draw a through line from that point to right now. We're going to show you how it got the way that it is, and more specifically on the tail end of it, we're going to be talking about how you can actually do something about it. What is the strategy moving forward? And we're going to have tons of special guests, current, former state representatives, other grassroots leaders. We just got a ton. So that's in production right now. So not sure if we're going to drop that after this episode or maybe one after, but you're going to want to stay tuned for that. And to do that, all you have to do is be sure to like and subscribe wherever you see this. If you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And of course, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, like and share, right? That's a key thing here. Liking and sharing. We have to do everything we can to try to defeat the algorithm, because I don't know what it is, but there is something about this algorithm that still hates us all across the board, and it just drives me nuts. So, be sure to do those things. And while you're at it, if you support the work that we are doing here to make Texas a self-governing, free, and independent nation, if you support the political, cultural, and economic independence of Texas, then we need your help, and we need your help right now. Head over to tnm.me/join and become a member of the Texas Nationalist Movement today. Your contribution, your membership helps us continue to do things like we're doing. You heard Andy talk about that we need to gather up and help with 4857. Well, for us to do that, we have to communicate with people. For us to communicate with people, it takes your help in the form of becoming a member of the TNM, or to go out there and share this message with as many people as you can. But it takes you. I mean, that's just all there is to it. So head over right now, tnm.me/join, and become a member today. You get a lot of perks. I'm not going to even pretend like I'm going to tell you all of them. But if you go to tnm.me/join, you will see all the cool stuff that you get. But more than all the cool stuff you get very, very deep appreciation from yours truly and others who also are members and that care about Texas just as deeply. So, that being said, it is time to put a pin in it and get ready for the next episode, right? So until then, I'm going to leave you with the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now, and the question is, will you stand with her?